Good morning. Thank you for being so patient. Whether the Unitarian Church of Evanston is your spiritual home or you are seeking comfort and connection in uncertain times, we are grateful you are with us. We are an inclusive and welcoming community seeking truth in love and striving to nurture this human spirit for a world made whole. We are guided by our principles and values, which remind us in every moment and through every challenge that each of us matters and that we are all connected through the vast and beautiful web of existence. Together, let us remember our oneness, our kinship with one another, and may we hold one another in heart and mind with tenderness and careful attention. There are many links of connection in the comments section below, including credits for readings, to virtual religious education, for donations, and to be added to our email newsletter list. A few announcements this morning. The all-church Zoom meeting on Wednesday at 5:30, and an email will go out in the early afternoon on Wednesday with a link. We'll hold a virtual coffee and conversation time immediately after worship today on Zoom. Today, we will get an introduction to our shared database and information system, Realm. This is a way for us to build connection and communication among our community. So please join us. You can find the link in the comments section below or from the newsletter. And next Saturday at 9:30, there will be a fair tax town hall on YouTube, sponsored by Unity Temple, CRS, the Poor People's Campaign, UUANI, and several other faith-based justice organizations. You can register at the link below. On October 4th from 3 to 5 p.m., join with members of Lake Street Church to a virtual viewing of the Braver Angels documentary on polarization and faith. Braver Angels is an organization working to unite people across political divides and depolarize America. Check the newsletter for information and to register for this two-part event in October.
Good morning. I'm Alice Swan, a member of UCE's Ministerial Search Committee, here with my dog Bella. I am here to let you know that the Search Committee's survey has reopened, and we want to hear from as many voices as possible. You can find the link for the survey on the church website, on the UCE member-to-member Facebook page, and in the weekly newsletter. The survey is your chance to tell us about your experiences at UCE, your thoughts on where our congregation is headed, and what skills, experience, and characteristics you think our next settled minister should have. The survey results will help us write the congregational record, which is a document that serves as a job listing for ministerial candidates. And the more feedback we get, the better and more inclusive our congregational record will be. As an added incentive, when you complete the survey, you will have the opportunity to enter a raffle and perhaps win a prize. We're asking that all surveys be completed by September 27th, but the sooner you enter the raffle, the more opportunities you'll have to win. Thanks for your participation in the search process.
And now I invite you to get your chalices ready and set a place for yourself and your family as we join in beloved community.
It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled from the peaks of the mountains, the long, winding road crossing forests and villages. And in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear. Because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. The words of Kahlil Gibran. Welcome to worship.
This song is for all women in struggle, forced to make their troubled ways alone. In the courts, in the homes, and in the factories, our heroines unnamed and unknown. They knew they'd never change the world without fighting, even though they had a lot to lose. If you can't stand the pain, it's worth deciding to defend a woman's right to choose. Oh, my sisters, dear sisters, be strong. Before we had a movement to call our own, there were women fighting one by one. And even now, when the going gets tough, there are times there seems to be no one. But we can never change the world without fighting, even though we have a lot to lose. If you can stand the pain, it's worth deciding to defend a woman's right to choose. Oh, my sisters, dear sisters, be strong. You know we'll never change the world without fighting, even though we have a lot to lose. If you can stand the pain, it's worth deciding to defend a woman's right to choose. Oh, my sisters, dear sisters, be strong. Whatever rights we cherish now, there are mothers and their mothers to thank. For the sake of ourselves and our daughters to come, it is time for us to join in the ranks. For we can never change the world without fighting, even though we have a lot to lose. If you can stand the pain, it's worth deciding to defend a woman's right to choose. Oh, my sisters, dear sisters, be strong. You know we'll never change the world without fighting, even though we have a lot to lose. If you can stand the pain, it's worth deciding to defend a woman's right to choose. Oh, my sisters, dear sisters, come along.
Mary Dudek and Jane and Lee Banner light the UCE chalice in honor of Ginny Syed, peace activist and leader, on the eve of International Day of Peace, in northern Illinois on the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations. Many other tribes, such as the Miami, Menominee, Ho-Chunk, Sac, and Fox, also called this area home. We name these in honor and respect. Please join in saying these words by Maya Angelou, Poet Laureate. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. Do not be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change.
Please join in saying the words of our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Our time for all ages is Mary Wears What She Wants by Keith Negley. This story is about a woman, Dr. Mary Edwards Walker. She was an amazing person. She earned her medical degree in 1855 and started a medical practice. And when the Civil War broke out, she became the first female Army surgeon and was captured by the Confederates after crossing enemy lines to treat wounded soldiers. She is the only woman to be awarded the Medal of Honor. As if that wasn't enough, She was an abolitionist and prohibitionist, a writer and lecturer in support of women's suffrage movement. And this year, of course, is the 100th anniversary of white women winning the right to vote. She was a rebel with many causes, including being gender fluid and wearing pants while working on her family's farm when she was young. Of course, we now know that women wearing pants is common and fashionable. Mary Walker was one of the pioneers that gave women a voice in a male-dominated world. She made a path for courageous women like Ruth Bader Ginsburg to make her mark in the world and to further the rights of marginalized people. And so here's a story about Mary Walker, who wore what she wanted. Once upon a time, but not too long ago, girls weren't allowed to wear pants. Can you imagine? The only thing girls could wear were uncomfortable dresses, heavy and hard to breathe in dresses, and tied too tight and can't bend over dresses. It's the way things have always been and the way things will always be, they said. And no one thought it should be any different. Actually, that last part's not entirely true. Mary thought it should be different, and she had an idea. A very daring idea. A great idea. Mary liked it so much she went into town to show everyone. It was kind of a big deal. And not everyone liked it. You're gonna regret wearing pants, Mary Walker, they all said. No, I won't, Mary said back. But she kind of did. Mary didn't understand why everyone cared so much about what she wore. They've never seen a girl wearing pants before, said her father. Sometimes people get scared of what they don't understand. So I should go back to wearing dresses? Asked Mary. I didn't say that, said her dad. That night, Mary didn't get a wink of sleep. The next morning, Mary decided she didn't like being told what to wear. Pants were just plain better in all sorts of ways. As she left for school, she discovered she could even walk faster in pants, which Mary appreciated. But when Mary got to school, it was more of the same. She started to worry this was how things were going to be from now on. I'd like to go to school, please, said Mary. But you're wearing boys' clothes, they all said. I'm not wearing boys' clothes, said Mary. I'm wearing my clothes. Now, if you'll excuse me, please, I'm late for school. And with that, she pushed through the door and went inside, prepared for even more of the same. Except it wasn't the same at all. And it was never the same again. This story is one example of how just one small act of resistance to injustice can lead to a larger movement and ultimately transform our world. And so join in singing This Little Light of Mine.
You're muted, Eileen.
Sorry about that. These are the joys and sorrows that have been submitted through the Google form found on our homepage of our website. And if you would like to, you can always send me an email or Reverend Susan. From Andy Fisher, he writes, he was very sorry to read of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. He said he's currently written 160 postcards to help defeat President Trump in November, so a liberal justice can be properly nominated to take her place, and he plans to write more. Peggy Bocard adds she was powerful and full of grace in the most generous ways possible. We need her spirit to continue. And we hold in loving care the grief of Justice Ginsburg's family. May they be comforted in their sorrow amidst the politicization of her death. And Janelle Breton shared earlier in our chat the gratitude for her sister Darlene's recovery after her 4th heart surgery and the complications. She is on the road to recovery. It's wonderful news. We know that these are not the only joys and sorrows that are on our hearts, and so we take a moment to be quiet, to read to ourselves the joys and sorrows that are added to our chat. We hold these in care together. And I invite you from home to say the names aloud of those who are most tender on your heart, those who have died, those who are experiencing great loss or illness. Please say their names and let them gather on the winds to be held in this community that knows no walls. I invite you to join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Source of love, hear our prayers as we lament with sorrow the loss of leaders who have taken great risks to shift the collective consciousness toward more justice, greater equity, and deeper compassion. We grieve the loss of a champion for liberation, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We hold in community all of our losses and encourage one another in our healing and despair. Source of courage, embolden us to bravely face the dangers before us. Fortify us to withstand the impact of hate in its many forms. Infuse us with the faith that love is stronger than hate, strong enough to move the mountains of injustice and oppression that rise before us. Source of life, fill our senses with the wisdom of beauty. Fuel our faith in the unfolding mystery and goodness of nature within among and beyond us. Restore our commitment to co-creating the flourishing of all beings. May we resist the lure of corruptible power and continue to weave together in all places the power of love with justice. May it be so. May we make it so.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
UCE remains a vital part of the world and our community. And because we continue to need one another in the blessings of community, we take this time to invite you to give to our shared plate. Today's offering will be shared with Shorefront Legacy Center. Shorefront is an archive of the history of Black people in Evanston, compiled and interpreted through the eyes of the Black community. Please read about them by going to the link below. You can text to give, send in a check, or give from our website. If you send a check, please indicate in the memo line if your check is for the shared offering, a pledge, capital campaign, or some other giving. Please give as generously as you are able, and may what you give bring you joy.
Our reading this morning is from American Immanence, Democracy for an Uncertain World by Michael S. Hogue, religious naturalist and professor of theology at Meadville Lombard Theological School. Creatural vulnerability is an ontological condition of life. It is universal, given, inherent. To be a living creature, to be a person, is to be woundable, able to cause and to suffer wounds, to harm and to be harmed, to eat and to be eaten. Contingent vulnerability, on the other hand, names the kind of vulnerability that disproportionately afflicts some of us more than others. Contingent vulnerability is determined by any number of factors, such as where and when we are born, the bodies and minds we are born into, the social and class locations we inhabit, and proximity to environmental hazards. Unlike creatural vulnerability, which is universal, given, and inherent, contingent vulnerability is uneven, constructed, and systemic. What if instead of externalizing vulnerability, we embraced its shared experience as the precondition of more empathic, emancipatory, and equitable democratic practices? What if instead of answering creatural insecurity with the quest for certainty, we found the courage to build uncertainty into our ways of knowing and our social, religious, moral, and political habits? What if rather than seeking to redeem or to be redeemed, we sought to build more resilient democratic communities, ones whose constitutive differences enriched their common purposes and whose sympathies were expanded by the common vulnerabilities they share? Our anthem this morning is a song called United States of Humanity. It is the winner of the Braver Angels Songwriter Contest. Enjoy this piece by Donna, Elaine Miller, and John Baker.
It's not black, it's not white, it's not wrong, it's not right. It's not red, it's not blue, it's just me and you. It's not rich, it's not poor, somewhere in the middle is the open door. If our points of view don't quite see eye to eye, well, that's all the more reason why we need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. A United States of humanity, the sum of every part. We need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. Resolutions in a revolution of the heart. We're living in a great divide. This fear of each other is our suicide. I believe love's gonna keep us alive, but only if we decide. We need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. A United States of humanity, the sum of every part. Need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. Resolutions in a revolution of the heart. It's not just the conversation, it's the listening. It takes every voice feeling heard to let freedom ring. We can solve our future, heal our history, sting, step toward our common ground, spread our better age of wings. We need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. A United States of humanity, the sum of every part. We need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. Resolution is revolution of the heart. Oh, we hold this truth to be self-evident. I have a dream, a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. We hold this truth to be self-evident. I have a dream, a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. A United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. A United States of humanity. We need it, we need it now. Resolutions in a revolution of resolutions in a revolution of revolutions in a revolution of the heart.
If you were inspired by that song, join us for the Braver Angels events in October. Check the newsletter for that. And thanks to George Monaco for sharing that song with us, or cluing us in on that, and to Elaine and John for their willingness to share that with all of us. These are the days of awe, the new year of the Jewish calendar. Rosh Hashanah is a time of reflection, prayer, and commitment to action. I've learned that a person who passes on Rosh Hashanah, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg did, they are a tzedek. I hope I said that right. And thank you, Gregory, for reminding us that and confirming that in the chat. This means that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was, as we all know, a good and righteous person. And it is said, may her memory be for blessing. This prayer calls us to live her legacy and to work to transform this world into a more loving, just, equitable, and peaceful world. As the world turns and burns, as empire collapses, as civil unrest rages, heroes die, and lies overshadow truth, we reflect, we pray, and we search for effective actions of resistance and revolution. With so much at stake and so much at risk, how do we move forward with hope and with love? How do we act in the prophetic words of the great American writer and activist James Baldwin as midwives to a new America? An America that holds the possibility of collective liberation. How do we bravely and lovingly take the risks necessary to build the beloved community, to continue the legacy of the ancestors who have fought and died for liberation for everyone, for us? Risk is a fundamental aspect of all of our lives. As Michael Hogue stated in our reading this morning, vulnerability and risk are ontologically basic. Risk is in the nature of being. Certain risks are part of living in relationship and on an unpredictable planet, risks that everyone is exposed to in fairly comparable ways. Other risks are contingent upon one's social, geographical, and class location, risks that are greater for those with marginalized identities living in conditions not of their own making, but which are compounded creation of unjust systems. There's a greater risk of developing asthma, for example, from breathing in polluted air if you live in an under-resourced, blighted neighborhood, which also increases the risk of violence stemming from lack of employment, opportunity, or investment. We aren't all facing the same risks. All of us are newly calculating unforeseen risks and weighing vulnerabilities during this pandemic as the US has gone without effective leadership or consistent, trustworthy guidance. Within a very brittle system of manufactured risk due to mistrust and the devaluing of truth, scientific reason, and facts, we are having to carefully consider everyday choices, which would have been automatic before. We're having to think about how to minimize whatever risks we can so we can absorb the risks we must. People are making choices based on their health, their age, where they live, who they live with, their job. We've had to think about the risks of handling our mail, going to the store, going to school or work. We've had to consider whether or not to wipe down groceries with bleach, take a walk outside, visit with a friend, give someone we love a hug. And then there are the impossible calculations that school administrators have had to make, weighing the risks of the health of our nation's children, teachers, and parents against the risks of developmental, mental, and emotional delays. The level of risk assessment involved in our everyday living, choices we never had to consider before, is exhausting. Everything is harder for all of us. And we must hold that with tenderness. Amidst all this, as people striving to nurture the human spirit and make the world whole, we reflect and pray. We weigh the risks of our action or inaction in response to manufactured risks. On top of the daily mundane risk calculations that make us weary, we consider how to respond to the other global pandemics of racism and oppression, rising authoritarianism, fascism, and environmental degradation. Can we absorb the risks of taking actions like attending an outdoor, mostly socially distanced rally with masks? Can we risk getting arrested to resist the countless undeniable daily injustices faced by so many? What are the risks of our inaction? What is at stake if we fail to respond and accept the status quo? In facing real external risks, the ones that are part of our inherent vulnerability, we are hardwired to seek safety. I'm not encouraging anyone to take unnecessary risks. I want us all to wear masks, to stay physically distanced, even though we risk isolation and loneliness. Yet, as people who covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all beings and the interconnected web of existence, we need to resist the urge for safety alone, if it means ignoring the dehumanizing and devaluing of others. We need to brace ourselves to take on the necessary risks of building the beloved community. There are small risks that may seem inconsequential, which can add up to big impact, like the story today of Mary Walker wearing pants. This is a small symbolic resistance that pushed against systems of intolerance and ignorance. Mary was living authentically, which can be a tremendous risk. It's an example of using privilege to build tolerance for certain risks in order to mitigate the vulnerabilities of those in greater danger. In the continual onslaught of horrifying news, this week we learned that women in ICE detention centers are being sterilized against their will and without their knowledge. This is eugenics. It's a part of the long-standing practice of genocide against Black and brown lives in this country. The Black woman, Dawn Wooter, who exposed this atrocity, took an enormous risk. Our duty as citizens in response is to listen and demand action. One action you can take is to sign up to support the Breathe Act. Get your pens ready, www.breatheact.org. www.breatheact.org. Striving toward democratic and progressive ideals is a risky endeavor. We risk investing our time and energy and passion, and still we could lose all we value and hold dear. Whatever happens on November 3rd, we can expect the upheaval to continue and worsen. Injustice didn't start with this administration and it won't end with it. So we can count on the need to stay in the struggle for justice in the months and the years to come. Our voices, our spirits, our minds, and our bodies are needed to build collective resilience. This country is in a state of collapse, arising from the hubris of seeking to eliminate vulnerability for some at the expense of others. We need to embrace our vulnerability and let it lead us to behave in empathic, emancipatory, and equitable ways, as Dr. Hogue named it in her reading. The risks we must face in this age are insurmountable in isolation. We cannot face all that threatens us alone, and we can't do it without an honest examination of ourselves, without seeing that the manufactured risks of inequity, oppression, racism, and white supremacy operate through us and impact all of us. What is at stake? In addition to the actual lives of Black, Brown, Indigenous, trans, and non-binary folks is our common humanity. What we are struggling for is the collective well-being of our minds, bodies, and souls. Our very moral and ethical wholeness is lost if we don't recognize ourselves in the other. And friends, that means even those who hold values we despise. It means holding the inherent worth and dignity of the Trump supporter alongside the inherent worth and dignity of the Black Lives Matter activist, the anarchist, and the gun rights advocate. Let me be clear, I'm not talking about false equivalencies. This is not about recognizing good people on both sides. As James Baldwin said, we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. Equivocating, making room for a disagreement rooted in unequal power structures, oppression for or the denial of humanity is not peacemaking. Without justice, there can be no peace. And yet the refusal to see my humanity must not move me to deny yours. The ultimate vulnerability is seeing ourselves in the other. It takes courage to recognize our own potential to harm as we remain aware of the danger of being harmed. It is a struggle to see another's vulnerability, even in their abuse of power. My grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-uncle were all Chicago police officers. Irish cops in a policing system corrupt to the core. I didn't know any of these men. I was 2 when my grandfather died, but I know he was a racist. Irish immigrants and their descendants are not all practicing racists, but there is bias that often emerges out of recent immigrant cultures that have been pitted against a more subjugated group for the purpose of dominance. Divide and conquer is a very effective tool of oppression. My ancestors, Italians and Irish, were 2 groups highly disparaged in the late 19th and 20th centuries as they arrived in the US in droves. As they emerged from that marginalized status, what also emerged was a culture of anti-Black racism, which persists. I have to be able to see myself in my ancestors, just as I see myself in my child, beaten by those ancestors. I must recognize the abuser and the abused live within me and profoundly are connected to me. The risk of the interior examination is the end of our innocence. Once you start to see and accept the white supremacy culture that our country is built upon, you can't unsee it. That's a risk. To examine the truth and examine our own part in upholding the lies that obfuscate the truth, the lie that the only real power is power over another. It is a risk to believe in the possibility of shared power because it means we have to help create it. There is vulnerability in living and working in community. There is risk in relationship. We will make mistakes, take wrong actions, harm and be harmed. The greater risk is inaction and isolation. Our democracy is crumbling. We are on the verge, if not already crossing the threshold of civil war. There is violence and dehumanization happening every day, right now. We have denigrated the atmosphere of this planet, raped her of the resources she has so abundantly provided, to the point that soon we may no longer be able to inhabit this planet. What is the cost of our inaction? There are plenty of people defending oppressive power structures, those who take great risks to advance the cause of hate. A white adolescent, not yet a man, murdered 2 people in Kenosha to defend a gas station. He was thanked by police for his presence. The revolutionaries resisting injustice and working to dismantle oppressive structures are blamed and critiqued. I'm asking myself every day, what risks am I willing to take to advance collective liberation? How can I participate in the breakdown necessary for a new way to emerge? I know the answer must begin with love, a love that emerges from knowing our oneness, a love that arises from the belief that only real liberation is collective liberation. That to be free, all of us must be free, and we must create that freedom together. Consider the power of collective actions of resistance, like the water protectors at Standing Rock and indigenous land defenders all over North America. Consider those arrested for obstructing the construction of a border wall and those arrested for leaving water for migrants. Think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the risks she has taken to protect the rights of the most vulnerable. These are cumulative, collective movements based in relationship with the most vulnerable in the lead. Imagine what is possible when vulnerability rather than dominance is at the center. Each of us has a different risk tolerance, and each of us experiences different dangers. Each of us has different ways to contribute to the cause of justice, equity, and liberation. The suffering world needs your passion and your willingness to lean into risk. You may be the witness, the truth teller, the activist, the healer, the educator, or the advocate. There is a role for all of us in the building of the beloved community. How might your vulnerability, your gifts and skills contribute to the practice of maintaining hope, building resilience, and cultivating communities of care? In the recent podcast throughline from NPR titled The Shadow of James Baldwin, Rund Abdel Fattah and Ramtin Arablouei interview Eddie Glaude, a professor at Princeton University and author of Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own. I close with some of Glaude's words from this interview speaking about Baldwin. He said, "We have to find communities of love, people who allow us to laugh full belly laughs, to rage, to be quirky, to be ourselves without cost, the people who hold us to account. If you're going to speak the truth, if you're going to bear witness and make the suffering real, you're going to risk loneliness. But in the midst of it all, you have to find the community of love that will love you to death, no matter your faults, who will give you the space to replenish so that you can join the fight again. Beloveds, may we lean into the risk of genuine, transforming, and liberating love. Let us rush into the fire of our commitment to create a more just and equitable world. Let us be willing to risk everything for one another. May it be so.
As Mary, Jane, and Lee extinguish the chalice, please join in saying these words by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, South African cleric, theologian, and anti-apartheid human rights activist. Liberation is costly. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, they had to travel through the desert. They had to bear the responsibilities and difficulties of freedom. There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining. They complained that their diet was monotonous. Many of them preferred the days of bondage and the flesh pots of Egypt. We must remember that liberation is costly. It needs unity. We must hold hands and refuse to be divided. We must be ready. Some of us will not see the day of our liberation physically, but those people will have contributed to the struggle. Let us be united. Let us be filled with hope. Let us be those who respect one another.
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around.
We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around.
We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around.
Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am?
See we
Do
one
I
another
know
clearly. Do we know
who
who we
you
are?
are? See we one another clearly.
See we one
Do we know
another clearly. Do we know
who we are? Oh, so is life a party. So is life. Oh, so is life a party. So is life.
Water make the river, river wash the mountain. Fire make the sunlight, turn the world around.
Heart is of the river, body is the mountain, spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around.
We are of the Spirit, truly of the Spirit. Only can the Spirit turn the world around.
Oh, so is life a mighty one.
So is life.
Oh, so is life a mighty one.
So is life.
Oh, so is life a mighty one.
So is life.
Oh, so is life a mighty one.
So is life.
Whoa, so is life a mighty one.
So is life.
Whoa, so is life a mighty one.
So is life.
Beloveds, may we lean into the risk of building the beloved community. May we practice courage, knowing we are all interconnected to each other and the planet. And may the memory of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the memory of us all be for blessing. Go in peace.